For decades, the question of what happens to the soul after death has intrigued both religious figures and scientists. For seniors, this question often intensifies with each passing year. Many wonder if consciousness continues in some form, if there's a greater purpose, or if everything simply ceases to exist. Amidst these mysteries, the physicist Stephen Hawking offered a perspective that, while not religious, raises profound reflections. Despite being known for his skeptical viewpoint, he never ignored the complexity of the human mind and what we call the soul. According to Hawking, the brain functions like a computer, and consciousness is the software that runs on that system. But what happens to this software when the body reaches the end of its life? His proposed answer may surprise, provoke, and even reassure those with an open mind. And all of this becomes even more relevant when facing the final stage of existence, as is the case for so many people after the age of 70. Stephen Hawking used to say that there is no heaven or afterlife in the way religions describe it. For him, these concepts were created as comfort for those who fear the end. However, that doesn't mean he completely dismissed the value of consciousness. In several interviews, Hawking explained that even as a scientist, he understood the human fascination with the idea of the soul. In his view, consciousness is the result of complex physical laws, but the very existence of something so sophisticated is, in itself, extraordinary. And what if this consciousness is more than just a biological process? What if there's something that science hasn't yet grasped? By addressing these possibilities with respect and logic, he didn't end the discussion, he broadened it. And perhaps that's precisely what the more mature audience is looking for, rational yet open explanations. If this topic also intrigues you, subscribe to the channel and hit the like button to continue reflecting with us. It's natural that thoughts about death become more frequent in old age, not out of fear, but out of a need to understand. The body no longer responds as it once did, losses accumulate, and the silence of the house often leads to contemplation. Hawking asserted that even after the body's death, what we've built while alive doesn't disappear so easily. Our actions, words, and even ideas continue to reverberate in other people. For him, this was a form of practical immortality, a comforting thought for those who feel their journey is coming to an end, but still wish to leave something of value behind. It's possible that the soul is, in part, this legacy of experiences that we share with the world. Perhaps it doesn't fly to another plane, but remains right here, in the gestures we inspire and the memories we evoke in others. Many seniors report strange experiences as they approach the end. Feelings of déjà vu, dreams of deceased loved ones, or even an unexpected peace. Science can't explain all these phenomena precisely. Hawking acknowledged that there are frontiers of knowledge that haven't yet been crossed. He said that the absence of evidence doesn't mean the absence of possibilities. Although he maintained that consciousness fades with the brain, he also admitted that we still know little about the mental universe. This opens the door to broader interpretations, especially from those who have lived long lives and seen more than most. In practice, death remains a great mystery, even for the greatest minds, and perhaps the fact that we don't know everything yet is a gift to the human imagination. Hawking believed that the most important thing was to enjoy the time while we're alive. It's not about denying death, but about understanding the value of life. For seniors, this may mean revisiting memories, forgiving, teaching, or simply being present. According to him, the soul would be a reflection of the conscious choices we make. Every ethical decision, every gesture of love, every thought of compassion, all of this forms the essence of who we are. And even if it doesn't survive as a separate entity, it remains in the consequences we leave behind. Thus, death ceases to be an abrupt cutoff and transforms into an indirect continuity, a legacy of attitudes that shape the future, even if we're no longer here. And this is something that science is beginning to study more closely. Quantum physics, although still poorly understood, raises hypotheses that challenge the traditional materialistic view. Hawking was cautious when dealing with this field, but recognized that there were aspects of reality that don't follow the same classical rules. The idea that particles can be in two places at the same time, or that the observer influences the phenomenon, suggests that consciousness may play a more active role than previously thought. And what if the soul, in this context, is a manifestation of this consciousness at a more subtle level? What if death is just a transition of state, like water turning into steam? Hawking didn't state this directly, but his reflections encouraged other scientists to explore these frontiers. And these are the questions that accompany us throughout life, until our last breath. With advancing age, many people feel that they are closer to the answers they've sought throughout their lives. The accumulated experience, the lived moments, the observed silences, everything seems to prepare the ground for understanding what comes next. Stephen Hawking, even without religious beliefs, deeply respected this human desire to find meaning. In one of his most well-known interviews, he stated that the brain is a complex machine, but that doesn't make it any less wonderful. This phrase reveals something essential. For him, the beauty of existence didn't need mystical explanations. The simple fact that we are here, conscious, would be enough to revere life. And by recognizing the importance of this feeling, he drew closer to those who, even without technical terms, feel that there is something beyond matter. Something that perhaps science doesn't yet know how to name, but that many seniors feel clearly in their final years. The big question isn't just whether there is a soul, but what it represents. For those who have experienced losses, illnesses, and overcoming challenges, the soul may mean something deeper than an invisible entity. It can be the collection of experiences that have shaped identity, the values cultivated, the affections built. Hawking saw life as a succession of physical processes, but he also understood that there's something special about self-awareness. The simple fact that we know we exist is, according to him, the greatest mystery of the universe. When we think about this from the point of view of someone who has lived a long life, we perceive the weight of these words. The soul, then, ceases to be just a matter of faith and becomes a matter of meaning as well. What we build internally throughout life can indeed have a value that transcends physical existence. Many seniors report that, with time, the fear of death diminishes, not because they become indifferent, but because they learn to accept the natural cycle of things. This serene wisdom contrasts with the anxiety of younger people, who often avoid even thinking about the subject. Stephen Hawking, even facing a degenerative disease for decades, maintained this calm in the face of the end. His way of dealing with death wasn't based on faith, but on rationality and focus on the present. He said that every second lived was a chance to contribute, to create, to express oneself. For him, that was enough. This stance can inspire those who feel that time is running out, but still wish to live it with dignity. It doesn't matter how much remains, but what one does with the time that still exists. And perhaps this is one of the most powerful messages for those in their golden years. Even without believing in the existence of a literal heaven, Hawking recognized that the human mind needs narratives to deal with the unknown. He didn't criticize those who sought spiritual comfort, as long as it didn't negate the importance of knowledge. This openness to dialogue is rare among scientists of his generation, and that's why his voice resonates to this day. He understood that for many people, the soul is also a reflection of the love lived, the bonds formed, the empathy shared. And if this is true, then someone's soul continues to live, as long as these connections persist. When we remember someone with affection, when we follow an old piece of advice, when we feel longing, we are giving continuity to that soul. Not as a separate being, but as an emotional and human legacy that remains in others. Old age brings the advantage of seeing life in perspective. What once seemed urgent now seems small. What was confusing now sounds clear. And what was frightening is now just part of the journey. Stephen Hawking saw existence as a succession of opportunities for discovery. Even when his body failed, his mind sought to understand more. He said that the universe is infinite in possibilities, and that perhaps the greatest of all is the human capacity to reflect on oneself. When a senior asks what will happen to their soul, they are, in fact, exercising this gift of consciousness. It's the most intimate and sophisticated thought someone can have. And if there is anything that lasts beyond death, perhaps it's precisely this desire to understand, to leave meaning, to continue existing through others. Hawking also believed that, even after the end, the body's energy is not lost. In physics, energy transforms, redistributes itself. The body returns to the earth, the elements return to the universe. But what about the mind? What about feelings? For him, this was more difficult to measure but not impossible to consider. He respected the mystery, even when he didn't have a direct answer. And this leads us to an important point. Not everything needs to be proven to be valued. For a senior who looks back and sees a life full of learning, the soul can be the sum of it all. It may not be on another plane, but it can still exist. In the photos, in the kept letters, in the stories told by grandchildren, the soul may not be eternal in the way we imagine, but it lasts long enough to touch the world around us. Among scientists, it's common to hear that everything that exists can be explained by the laws of nature. Hawking agreed with this idea, but acknowledged that human consciousness is still one of the least understood areas. This includes memories, emotions, the deep feelings that many seniors know so well. There's a difference between understanding how the brain works and understanding the impact of lived experiences. It's one thing to analyze the electrical impulses that form thoughts. It's another, far more complex, to explain why a childhood memory still brings tears to one's eyes at 80. This distance between what is measured and what is felt may be the space where the idea of the soul remains alive. Perhaps science will one day be able to translate these emotions into data, but until then, they remain the most human territory there is. Technology advances, studies multiply, but no machine is capable of understanding the value of a hug, the silence of longing, or the presence of someone who has passed away. These are realities that escape exact logic, and that many seniors recognize naturally. Hawking knew this. As much as his career was marked by numbers, formulas, and theories, he also experienced losses, loves, and human challenges. He knew that the mind is not made up of just calculations, but also of sensations difficult to translate. And it's in this silent space that many people feel the soul is. It's not necessary to prove its existence to feel it. Just remember someone who has passed away and still moves us. This invisible bond may not fit in a laboratory, but it fits perfectly in the life of someone who has lived a long time. When we talk about soul and death, we're not just dealing with beliefs, but also with meaning. The soul, in this sense, can be the symbol of everything that makes a life worthwhile. Stephen Hawking used to say that life is precious precisely because it has an end. This idea, far from being pessimistic, carries a positive urgency. It encourages us to live with more awareness, to say what matters, to listen attentively. When a senior understands this, they begin to value every simple gesture of daily life. And it's in this process that the soul strengthens, even without guarantees of continuity after death. The most important thing, according to Hawking, is not what comes next, but what we do while we're here. And this, in itself, already transforms the way we see the finitude of life. In his last interviews, already with his body quite debilitated, Hawking showed serenity. Even in the face of the end, he continued to contribute with ideas, writing books and answering questions. He didn't seek religious comfort, but he also didn't belittle those who did. This shows a valuable lesson for those in their senior years. It's possible to coexist with different ways of seeing death without conflict. The soul can be interpreted in various ways, all legitimate within the human experience. And the most important thing is that each person finds an answer that brings peace, whether it's based on faith, science, or intuition. The essential thing is that this answer helps one live the remaining days with purpose, serenity, and gratitude for the path traveled. Death, for many seniors, doesn't represent just the end of life, but the closing of a cycle that involved achievements, mistakes, learnings, and loves. When Hawking spoke about the universe, he made a point of remembering that we are made of the same material as the stars. This vision places us as part of something greater, even if we don't know exactly what it is. And perhaps the soul lies precisely in this, in the awareness that we belong to a vast mystery, where every life matters. When someone passes away, something of that person continues to be present in those who remain. A word, a habit, a memory, and this doesn't need scientific proof to be real. For those who have lived many years, this presence is felt clearly, even if it cannot be explained. With time, what seemed like a doubt becomes a quiet certainty. It's not necessary to understand everything to live well. Hawking didn't have all the answers, but he had the courage to ask questions. And that's what inspires so many people to this day. In the end, perhaps the soul of a senior doesn't disappear. Perhaps it transforms, spreads, dissolves into everything it touched. In the hands of a grandchild, in the music someone still sings, in the gentle gesture that became an example. And even if science continues to study what consciousness is, nothing prevents each one from finding their own meaning. Because in the silence that comes after the last breath, there may be something that only the heart understands. Something that doesn't need to be said, just lived. When reflecting on the end of life, many seniors no longer seek absolute certainties, but rather a more human and practical understanding of what they have lived. Stephen Hawking, even physically limited, showed the world that the mind remains free as long as there is curiosity. He didn't need to believe in a paradise to value life. On the contrary, his view was that every conscious moment was in itself a gift. This perspective can be extremely liberating for those who feel that time is short. It doesn't matter if there's something after death in the religious mold. What matters is what the person feels, believes, and wishes to transmit while they still breathe. The soul, in this sense, is built on daily choices, on the relationships cultivated, and on the ability to leave something better than they found. Science doesn't end the discussion about the soul, it just changes the way it's done. Today, many researchers study the relationship between mind, consciousness, and reality in ways that would have been unthinkable a few decades ago. Hawking was part of this transition, opening the door to debates previously avoided. And although he argued that consciousness ends with the brain, he also acknowledged that there is much that we still don't understand. For those who have lived a long time, this is not a reason for fear, but for reflection. The unknown has always been part of life, from birth to farewell. And knowing that there are still questions without answers can be comforting. It means that existence is not limited by what we already know, but expanded by what we can still imagine. There's a difference between end and disappearance. When someone dies, the physical presence ceases, but the effects of their existence continue for a long time. Hawking believed that a person's contribution goes beyond the limits of their body. This idea is especially powerful for those in old age and fear becoming irrelevant. In fact, everything that has been taught, lived, and shared continues to exist in subtle but real forms. A recipe passed on, a piece of advice remembered, a story told again. All of this keeps alive the essence of what has been. The soul, then, is not measured by its permanence on another plane, but by the influence it continues to exert in the present. This is a form of eternity, accessible and verifiable, even without mystical explanations. The last phase of life can be paradoxically the wisest. When the body no longer runs, the mind walks with greater depth. Many seniors report that, as they age, they have learned to value silences more than words. Stephen Hawking, even confined to a chair and unable to speak for himself, communicated ideas that changed the world. This proves that the soul, if understood as active consciousness, doesn't depend on physical strength to express itself. It manifests in intention, in thought, and in what is transmitted to the other. And even if science one day concludes that the soul is just a product of the brain, this doesn't diminish its value. On the contrary, it shows that something so complex and subtle was born from us, and that in itself is already reason for reverence. As the years go by, death ceases to be a taboo and becomes an expected stage. But this doesn't make it any less significant. On the contrary, its proximity makes many see life with different eyes. Hawking said that we should look at the stars and not at our feet. This phrase, said by someone who faced extreme limitations, brings a valuable lesson. Even in the face of the end, it's possible to keep one's gaze elevated. The soul, if it's what moves us to seek meaning, is never really at rest. It questions, dreams, builds, and shares. And as long as there is someone willing to continue these searches, the soul of the departed also continues, even if in another form. If you've made it this far, It's a sign that you also carry deep questions within you. This already shows that your soul, regardless of belief, is alive, attentive, and curious. And that's what matters most. The journey of life doesn't end when the heart stops, but when we stop provoking reflections in others. And on this point, both you and Stephen Hawking continue to be present. If this video made you think, share it with someone who also seeks meaning. And if you'd like to follow other reflections like this, subscribe to the channel. Sometimes the answer is not at the end of the question, but in the path it invites us to travel.